Liara had once lived among the stars like a queen among jewels. Her world had been filled with light, music, and endless honor. She was the daughter of a royal house born with silver eyes and a voice that carried power. To her people, she was the promise of tomorrow. To her enemies, she was the shadow of fear. But the higher she rose, the deeper her fall became. The betrayal had come silently, like a knife in the night. One by one, her closest allies turned their faces away. Greedy ministers whispered lies into the ears of the court. Trusted commanders shifted their loyalty to another. And when the palace gates were thrown open to enemy soldiers, Liara realized the truth. She was not a princess anymore. She was prey. Her escape was not glorious. It was desperate. Her ship, once a vessel of pride, became her coffin of loneliness. She fled through dark space, hunted by shadows of her own people. Behind her, the empire collapsed into war. Ahead of her, only silence waited. Stars that once gave her hope now seemed cold and unfeeling. Days turned to weeks. She drifted alone, her body weak and her spirit breaking. The food reserves thinned. The ship's systems failed one by one. Sometimes she wondered if it would be better to end it all and let the void take her. No throne awaited her. No family prayed for her return. She was nothing but a fallen name, a ghost of a broken dynasty. In the long silence, memories haunted her. She remembered her mother's gentle hands brushing her hair, whispering, "You are never alone." She remembered her father's proud gaze when she first commanded a starship. She remembered the cheers of thousands when she spoke to them with courage. Where were they now? All gone, all scattered like dust in the wind. Liara pressed her forehead against the cold metal wall of her ship and whispered, "I am lost." The words echoed back at her, cruel and empty. She had thought herself strong, but strength had no meaning when the heart was hollow. The engines screamed when they finally failed. Fire licked the sides of her vessel as it entered a foreign sky. She had no control, no direction. Her hands trembled on the controls, but the ship ignored her pleas. She braced herself for the end. Perhaps it was better this way. Perhaps she had run far enough. Through the cracks of smoke, she saw a blue world beneath her. A small planet wrapped in clouds and oceans. It looked fragile, nothing like the mighty worlds she had known. Yet in that fragile sphere there was something strange, something alive, something warm. The crash was violent. Metal screamed, trees shattered, and the ground itself shook. The ship broke into pieces, and Liara felt her body slam against the restraints. Pain filled her vision with light, but she did not let go. She clawed her way out of the wreckage, her breath ragged, her body bleeding. The air was heavy, strange, but it kept her alive. She stumbled into the night, her silver eyes reflecting the fire behind her. Her chest rose and fell with effort. She was still alive, though she had no reason to be. She looked at the stars one last time and whispered, "Why am I still here?" The forest gave her no answer. The world around her was silent, broken only by the crackle of fire. She fell to her knees, feeling weaker than she had ever been. She was not a princess now, not even a warrior. She was a fugitive, a stranger, a soul without a home. Her heart whispered of hopelessness. Maybe her story ended here on this forgotten world. Maybe her name would fade into nothing, her legacy buried under alien soil. But fate had other plans. Somewhere in the darkness of that night, footsteps began to move. A human man, ordinary and unarmed, was walking toward the crash site. His life was small compared to hers, but his heart carried a flame she had never known before. Liara did not yet know him. She did not yet understand humanity. But the moment she fell into the dirt of that strange planet, her destiny had already begun to change. For even in the deepest hopelessness, sometimes a single meeting could light a fire strong enough to outshine the stars. David lived a quiet life. His world was not filled with empires or crowns. It was filled with grease, rust, and the hum of broken machines. He was a mechanic in a small town where nobody dreamed of stars. People came to him when their old trucks failed, when their machines coughed their last breath, or when something needed patching that others had already given up on. He had grown used to being invisible. His parents were gone, his friends had scattered, and his days passed in the rhythm of work. Fixing things gave him comfort. It was the only way he felt useful, turning what was broken into something that could live again. Yet deep inside, he sometimes wondered if he was the broken one. That night was like any other, or so he thought. The sky stretched clear and endless, filled with stars he rarely looked at. But suddenly the heavens tore open with fire. A burning streak raced across the night, screaming louder than thunder. His small workshop shook as if the earth itself groaned in pain. David ran outside, his heart pounding. He saw the crash beyond the hills, fire rising into the dark sky. At first he thought it was a plane, maybe an accident. Without thinking, he grabbed his old flashlight, climbed into his truck, and drove toward the smoke. The closer he came, the stranger everything felt. The ground was scorched, trees bent and broken. When he reached the crash site, his breath caught. This was no airplane. It was a ship, shattered metal glowing with strange lights, wires sparking like veins of fire. He had never seen anything like it, not even in books or old movies. Cautiously, he stepped forward. The air smelled of ash and something unfamiliar, sharp and electric. Then through the smoke he saw her. She lay on the ground, her body weak, her clothes torn, her silver eyes glowing faintly even in the dark. She was not human. David knew that instantly. Her skin shimmered faintly under the firelight, her features sharp, almost royal, yet delicate with exhaustion. For a long moment he froze. Fear pressed against his chest. He could run. He could pretend he had never seen this. But then she lifted her head slightly, her eyes meeting his, and in that single glance, he saw something that broke him. Desperation. Not the kind of desperation he had seen in broken machines or dying animals, but the kind of pain only a soul could carry. She looked lost. She looked hopeless. And though she was a stranger from the stars, he could not turn away. David dropped to his knees beside her. "Hey," he whispered, unsure if she could even understand him. "You're alive. Just hold on." Her lips moved, soft and broken. The words were strange, heavy with an accent, but he caught pieces. "A name, Liara." Carefully he helped her up. Her body was trembling, every step heavy, but she leaned on him as if she had no choice. David wrapped her arm around his shoulder and guided her to his truck. Each breath she took seemed like a battle. He drove back slowly, his mind racing with questions, but his heart knew only one thing. She needed him. Back at his workshop, he cleared the old table and laid her down gently. His hands shook as he searched for medical supplies, bandages, water, anything to help. He was no doctor, just a man with a box of tools and a stubborn will. Still, he cleaned her wounds, stopped the bleeding, and covered her with his old blanket. Liara watched him silently, her silver eyes heavy with exhaustion, but not mistrust. In her world, humans were nothing more than whispers, weak and short-lived. Yet, here was one bending himself to save her, asking for nothing in return. David sat beside her through the night, wiping sweat from her forehead, checking her breathing. He told himself he was crazy. He told himself she wasn't his problem. But when he looked at her, this broken, fallen being from the stars, he felt something stir inside him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't fear. It was something stronger, something he hadn't felt in years, a reason to care. By dawn, Liara's breathing steadied. She opened her eyes, her voice a whisper. "Why, help me?" David looked at her, tired but certain. "Because you needed me," he said simply. She blinked at him, surprised by the honesty of the answer. And in that moment, a fragile bond began to grow between them. Liara, the lost princess, and David, the forgotten mechanic. Two broken souls who had nothing left, except the chance to save each other. The morning sun touched the small scrapyard, turning the metal piles into glowing shapes of gold. Birds called from the trees and the world seemed ordinary again. But inside David's workshop, nothing was ordinary anymore. A princess from the stars lay resting on his old table, wrapped in his blanket, breathing slowly. Liara woke with a start, her body stiff from pain. For a moment she did not know where she was. Her silver eyes darted around the strange room filled with tools, machines, and scraps of old engines. It was nothing like the shining hall she once knew. And then she saw him. David sat slouched on a chair, asleep, his head resting on his arm. His clothes were stained with grease and dust, his hands rough with calluses. Yet he had stayed beside her the whole night. A stranger, a human, had kept watch as though she were the most important thing in his world. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her ribs. The sound woke him. David blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked at her with worry. "Careful," he said gently. "You're still hurt." Liara hesitated, then asked softly, "Why, help?" Her words were broken, shaped slowly by her lips. The human tongue was not her own, but she was trying. David gave a small smile, though his eyes were tired. "Because I couldn't leave you there." "You'd have done the same for me." "Right?" She did not answer. In her world, kindness was often a mask for power. No one helped without wanting something in return. Yet this man looked at her as if she were simply someone in need. It was strange, unfamiliar. Over the next days, David cared for her wounds. He cooked small meals, showed her how to drink warm tea, and even laughed softly when she made faces at the bitter taste. She spoke little, but she listened. She watched the way his hands worked with machines, fixing broken engines with patience. He explained things to her in simple words, even though she barely understood. At night, when she lay awake, she studied him. He had no crown, no armor, no great army. He lived alone, surrounded by junk others had thrown away. Yet there was something about him that reminded her of stars. Not their coldness, but their quiet light. One evening, as he adjusted the bandages on her arm, she whispered, "You fix everything?" David chuckled. "Not everything, but I try." She looked at him seriously. "Even me?" The question surprised him. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he nodded. "If I can." Her chest tightened at those words. No one had said something so simple to her before. Back in her empire, people had bowed, praised, or feared her. But no one had looked at her wounds and promised to help just because they wanted to. The fragile bond between them grew quietly. She told him her name, Liara, and pieces of her story. How she had once been a princess, how betrayal had torn her life apart, how she had no one left. Her voice broke at times, and she turned her face away, ashamed of her weakness. But David never judged. He only listened, nodding, sometimes offering a clumsy word of comfort. "You're not alone anymore," he told her one night, his voice low. She looked at him, surprised by his certainty. Could it really be true? Could a simple human from a small planet understand the loneliness of a fallen princess? Still, when she saw the kindness in his eyes, something inside her softened. It was dangerous, she knew. Bonds made people weak. Bonds had betrayed her before. But bonds also gave strength. And perhaps she needed that strength again. The days passed slowly, each one binding them closer. He taught her human words, and she laughed, soft, almost shy when she mispronounced them. She showed him small pieces of her technology, guiding his rough hands with her delicate ones. In those quiet moments, the scrapyard became less of a cage and more of a home. Yet shadows lingered at the edge of her heart. She knew her enemies were searching. She knew this peace could not last forever. But when she looked at David, when she heard his steady voice, she allowed herself a fragile hope. For the first time since her fall, she no longer felt completely lost. And in his workshop filled with broken machines, Liara realized that maybe, just maybe, two broken souls could begin to fix each other. The days in David's scrapyard began to feel almost normal. Liara's wounds healed slowly under his care. She was still weak, but her strength returned step by step. She learned more of his language, enough to form simple sentences. Sometimes David laughed when she used words in strange ways, and sometimes she laughed back, her silver eyes shining softly. For the first time in months, she felt a small warmth inside her chest. It was not the burning fire of duty or the heavy weight of her crown. It was something quieter, something gentle, but peace was a fragile thing, and Liara knew it could never last. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, she stepped outside the workshop. The air smelled of oil and earth. She looked up at the stars, her heart heavy. Somewhere out there, hunters were still searching for her. Soldiers sworn to her enemies would not stop until she was captured or dead. The galaxy was wide, but it was not wide enough to hide forever. David walked up behind her, wiping grease from his hands. "You're quiet tonight," he said. She hesitated before answering. "Days will come," he frowned. "Who?" "My people," she whispered. "Not mine anymore, enemies, they want me." David studied her face. There was no fear in her eyes, only a kind of tired certainty. He didn't fully understand her world, but he understood danger, and he understood that she was right. If what she said was true, sooner or later, trouble would find them. That night, David couldn't sleep. He sat awake, listening to the sound of the wind moving through broken machines outside. He looked at Liara, sleeping on the old cot he had given her. She looked peaceful, but her words echoed in his head. They will come, and they did. It started with strange noises in the sky, a low hum that didn't belong to any plane or helicopter. Then lights, faint but sharp, moving in ways no human craft could. David's heart sank. He knew instantly. It was them. Liara felt it too. She rushed outside, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. Her voice shook. They found me. David stood beside her, his fists clenched though he had nothing to fight with. The scrapyard suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Shadows moved in the distance, dark figures stepping out of glowing ships. Soldiers. They carried weapons that glowed like fire, their armor shining under the moonlight. Their leader's voice rang out, harsh and cold. Princess Liara, surrender yourself. There is no escape. Liara's breath caught. For a moment she almost stepped forward. A part of her believed she deserved capture, that her running had gone on long enough. But then she felt David's hand brush her arm, steady and firm. Don't, he said quietly. She looked at him, confused. If I stay, you die. David shook his head. Fear was in his eyes, yes, but there was something stronger too. Determination. If they want you, they'll have to go through me first. Liara stared at him in shock. This man, this fragile human, was standing against soldiers from the stars. He had no weapon, no armor, no reason except one. He would not abandon her. The soldiers laughed when they saw him. To them, he was nothing. A weak creature of a primitive world. Their leader raised his weapon, ready to strike. But David did not move. His voice was steady when he spoke. She's not yours anymore. She stays with me. The moment felt endless. Liara's heart pounded like a drum. She wanted to scream at him to run, to save himself, but she couldn't. His defiance burned brighter than any fleet she had commanded in her past life. The soldiers advanced. David grabbed a heavy wrench from the ground, his only weapon. He stood in front of Liara, his body shaking but unyielding. And in that instant, Liara understood something she had never known before. This human, small and fragile, carried a strength her people had never understood. It was not the strength of weapons or crowns. It was the strength of a heart that refused to let go. The night air trembled with the coming storm. Liara's enemies had arrived. The fragile bond she had built with David was about to be tested in fire. And as she looked at him standing there, ready to fight for her, she felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. The scrapyard turned into a battlefield under the cold moonlight. Metal towers of broken machines stood like silent witnesses as the soldiers closed in. Their weapons glowed, humming with deadly energy. David stood with nothing but a wrench in his hands, his heart racing in his chest. He was no soldier. He had never held a gun, never fought in a war. But when he looked at Liara behind him, her silver eyes filled with fear and guilt. Something inside him hardened. He would not let them take her. Not while he still breathed. The first soldier stepped forward, raising his weapon. David swung the wrench with all his strength. The metal cracked against the soldier's arm, sparks flying as the alien stumbled back. For a brief moment, David felt hope, but it was gone too quickly. The others rushed at him. Blasts of energy lit up the night, striking the ground, tearing holes in the dirt. David dodged clumsily, swinging wildly. He was fast with his hands. Years of fixing machines had given him skill. But this was no workshop. He was fighting soldiers trained for war. One of them struck him across the chest. Pain exploded in his body, throwing him to the ground. His breath left him in a sharp gasp. His wrench slipped from his fingers. The world spun, Liara cried out. She tried to rush forward, but another soldier blocked her, holding his weapon to her face. Her heart pounded as she watched David struggle to rise, blood staining his shirt. Why was he doing this? Why was a human willing to bleed for her, when even her own people had betrayed her? David pushed himself up on shaking arms. His voice was weak but steady. I won't let you take her, the soldiers laughed. To them, he was nothing. But Liara's chest burned as she looked at him. She felt something break inside her, a wall she had built for years. A wall of hopelessness, of fear, of shame. Her whole life she had believed she was strong because of her crown, her armies, her power. But when all of that was taken, she had been empty. Lost. She thought she had nothing left. Yet this human with no power, no crown, no army, stood against the stars for her. Her vision blurred with tears. Her voice cracked as she whispered, David. A soldier kicked him down again, pressing a boot against his back. He groaned but still tried to rise. His blood stained the dirt, and in that moment, something inside Liara snapped. She was done running, done hiding, done letting others suffer for her. With a cry that shook the air, Liara unleashed her power. For too long she had buried it, afraid it would draw her enemies. But now she no longer cared. Energy burst from her body like a storm, glowing silver and blue. The soldier holding her stumbled back, his weapon flying from his hand. Her voice rang out, fierce and trembling with rage.
Enough!
The soldiers froze, their eyes wide. They had expected a broken fugitive, not the fire of a princess reborn. Liara raised her hands, light spilling from her fingers. The scrapyard trembled as her power surged, knocking the soldiers back, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Blasts of energy ripped through the night, forcing the enemy ships to retreat. One by one, they stumbled into their vessels, shouting orders. Within minutes, the hunters were gone, leaving only smoke and silence behind. Liara fell to her knees, her breath ragged. The power faded, leaving her trembling. But she didn't care. She crawled across the dirt to David's side, lifting his head into her lap. His face was pale, blood streaking his cheek. His eyes opened slowly, weak but alive. He looked at her with a faint smile. Still, "Here," he whispered. Tears slid down her face. She pressed her forehead against his. "Why do you do this? You are only human. You could have run." David's lips moved, his voice soft as the wind. "Because you weren't meant to be alone." Her heart broke at those words. She had thought herself lost forever, hopeless and forgotten. But here he was, bleeding and broken, reminding her of something greater than crowns or empires. He had given her what she thought she would never have again: hope. As she held him in her arms, Liara understood the truth. David had saved her, not with weapons, not with power, but with his heart. And now, it was her turn to save him. The night after the battle was heavy with silence. Smoke still curled from broken machines, and the ground was scarred with marks of fire. The scrapyard, once only a home of junk and rust, now felt like the grave of a war. Liara sat beside David inside the workshop. He lay on the cot, his shirt torn and his chest wrapped with bandages she had made from her own clothes. His breaths were shallow, his skin pale, yet his eyes remained steady whenever they opened. She had healed wounds before, but never like this. On her homeworld, machines could mend flesh in seconds and medicines worked like miracles. Here she had nothing, only her trembling hands, old human bandages, and a heart filled with fear. As she touched the cloth on his wounds, her silver eyes burned with tears. She had seen armies destroyed, cities fall, stars go dark. None of it had shaken her as much as watching one human bleed for her. "Why?" she whispered into the quiet. "Why do you fight for me?" David stirred, his voice weak but clear. "Because you matter." Her chest tightened. No one had said that to her in years. In her empire, people had called her powerful, important, royal. But none of those words had meant what his did. To him, she mattered not as a princess, not as a leader, but simply as herself. For hours, she sat there, torn between two worlds. In one world, she could run again. She could fix her ship, hide among the stars, maybe even reclaim her throne someday. In the other world, she could stay here, beside a human who had nothing but gave her everything. The choice clawed at her heart. Her people had abandoned her, but a small part of her still felt guilty. She was born to rule, to protect them. Could she leave that behind forever? And yet, when she imagined going back, all she saw was emptiness. Power without love, duty without trust. She turned her gaze to David again. His rough hands, scarred from years of fixing broken things, now rested limp by his side. His breathing was uneven but steady, and she thought of how he had stood against soldiers with nothing but a wrench. How he had refused to leave her, even when death stood in front of him. No crown, no army, no weapon had ever given her that kind of loyalty. The truth grew inside her like a flame. She did not want the empire back. She did not want to wear the crown again. What she wanted was here, in this small scrapyard, in the heart of a man who had chosen her when the galaxy had thrown her away. Her tears finally fell. She leaned close, brushing her hand against his cheek. "David," she whispered, her voice shaking, "I choose you." His eyes opened slightly, surprised. "Choose me?" "Yes," she said, her words slow but sure. "Not as princess, not as ruler. As woman, as heart, you are my true partner." A faint smile curved his lips, even through the pain. "That's good," he breathed. "Because I already chose you." Liara's chest filled with warmth, a feeling so strong it hurt. For the first time since her fall, she felt whole again. Not because of power, not because of duty, but because she had found someone who saw her, not her crown. The night passed quietly. She stayed awake, holding his hand, listening to the steady rhythm of his breaths. The stars above shone cold and far, but inside the workshop she felt a warmth greater than any sun. When dawn came, the light spilled through the windows, painting the room gold. Liara rose and looked at the horizon. She knew her enemies would come again. She knew the galaxy would not forget her. But now she was not afraid because she was no longer lost, no longer hopeless. She had made her choice, and she would fight, not for a throne, not for a name, but for the man who had given her hope when she had none left. The days after the battle passed slowly. The scrapyard was quiet again, but the air was different now. The machines no longer looked like piles of junk. To Liara, they looked like reminders of the man who had risked everything for her. David healed slowly, though the wounds left him weaker than before. Each time he tried to stand, Liara would place her hand on his chest and whisper, "Rest, you've done enough." He would only smile, tired but stubborn, the same way he had smiled when facing soldiers twice his size. In those days, they talked often. She told him about the stars, about her empire, about the weight of a crown that had never felt like hers. He listened with quiet eyes, never judging, never demanding more. And when he spoke about Earth, about his father's old scrapyard and the life of fixing broken things, she felt something she had never known. Peace, but peace never lasts forever. One evening, a low hum filled the sky. Liara froze, her heart sinking. She knew that sound, the thrum of Imperial engines. The Empire had not forgotten her. They had come to finish what they had started. David stood, still weak, but his jaw set. "They're here for you," she shook her head. "No, they are here for us." They stepped outside together. Above the scrapyard, 3 ships descended like dark vultures, their metal wings cutting the evening sky. Soldiers in black armor marched out, weapons raised. At their front was a tall commander, his voice sharp as a blade. "Princess Liara," he called. "By the order of the Empire, you are to surrender. You will return, or you will die here." The words were meant to crush her, but Liara did not bow. Not this time. She reached for David's hand and he tightened his grip without fear. Together they stood before an army. Her voice rang clear. "No, I am no longer your princess. I am not your property, I am free. And I have chosen my place." The soldiers hesitated. None had ever heard royalty speak like this. The commander sneered. "Chosen? Chosen what? This weak human?" David raised his head, his eyes burning. "Weak?" he said. "Maybe, but I stood when your men came. I fought when you thought I'd run. And I'll fight again because she's not just a princess. She's someone worth protecting." The commander laughed, but Liara's heart swelled. For the first time in her life, someone claimed her not for power, not for bloodline, but for love. The soldiers advanced. Blasters lit the air. David grabbed a steel rod, swinging with all the strength he had left. Liara moved beside him faster than the soldiers expected, her training and fury guiding every strike. Together they fought like 2 halves of one flame. The battle was brutal. Sparks flew, metal clashed, and the air filled with smoke. David's body weakened, but each time he stumbled, Liara caught him. And when Liara was cornered, David's strike would save her. It was not the strength of a king's army, but it was the strength of trust of 2 hearts fighting as one. At last the commander fell. His armor cracked, his weapon broken. The surviving soldiers looked at Liara, their will shattered. For the first time they saw not a fallen princess, but a free soul. They retreated to their ships, engines screaming as they fled into the night sky. Silence returned. David dropped to one knee, his chest heaving. Liara rushed to him, holding him close. Tears streaked her face, not of fear, but of relief. You stayed with me," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "Told you. I already chose you." She pressed her forehead to his, her heart steady at last. "Then hear me now. I am yours. Forever." The stars above shone brighter, as if the universe itself witnessed their vow. From that day forward, Liara no longer searched for home in the ruins of her past. She had found it here in a scrapyard on a small blue planet, in the arms of a human who refused to let her fall. And for David, a simple man who once thought he was nothing but broken hands and rusted machines, he discovered that even an ordinary human could change the fate of a fallen princess. Because humanity's greatest power was not its weapons, not its technology, but its heart, and in the end, that heart had saved her.